Hi and welcome. Welcome to this evening's webinar. I am Georgiana Danet. I am a yoga and tantra teacher, and I am the coordinator of the Swedish yoga branch of our yoga school. And for this evening, I have prepared a topic which is called how to develop a supernatural clarity of your consciousness. And for the first hour, I will present the topic, and then we will have time for questions and answers. So I hope that this will be interesting enough for you to also ask some questions at the end. So now we will start. And we start with the motto: all phenomena, issues, situations, things, and beings in the universe appear always to us in accordance with our own visions. And this is, it will be the red thread throughout this webinar, and it is important to keep it in our mind. Most people who, by free choice, ascend on a genuine spiritual path, as we, all of us do, have an ultimate aim, the supreme state of spiritual liberation, or moksha as it is called in Sanskrit. So moksha primarily involves simply exiting from illusion. And God, in his grandiose creation game, gives birth with the help of the great cosmic power Bhuvaneshwari, the cosmic power of space, to the cosmic illusion Maya. So when we discover the truth about Maya, we realize that something and all coexist as an inseparable and divine unity, which is actually a unique godly truth, which is multifaceted. And this is also why it is so fascinating for us, because it has so many aspects, so many facets that we can discover and uncover. So the Sanskrit word Maya comes from the root ma, meaning to measure. The unique infinite, who is, as we all know, immeasurable, is measured through this power in the form of space. On the human level, Maya is the terrible force that in a very mysterious manner separates the unity in parts. In fact, it creates this illusion of separation. And I'm sure that we all understand very well how it feels, because most of the time we feel separated from the rest. We feel separated from others. We feel separated from this unity. So Maya is the feeling of isolation, singularity, created by our ignorant mind, by our mental structure, that we then project out as an imaginary reality, which fools the ignorant human being and thus creates ignorance, suffering, selfishness, violence. We live in these great cosmic illusions in which we do not always feel that we are embraced by God, nor that God is always present in us. And this is also one of the sources of our human suffering. In addition to these cosmic illusions, we also live with the illusion about ourselves, because most of us that are on a spiritual path and we sincerely want to develop spiritually, we have yet to discover who we really are. So we live with the illusion about ourselves because we still identify ourselves with, for example, our physical body, also with our biological age, or our sex, or our profession, or our upbringing, social status, our mental structure, our emotional structure, and also maybe even the place occupied within the spiritual group which we belong to, and so on and so forth. So I just took here a few short examples, but of course the list can be continued. Beside these two illusions, we also live with another one, which our society indoctrinates us with, in which what we learn in school is mostly a lie. And there are some very interesting books and documentaries who actually speak about how the school, how the education system was made and is still functioning. And then we realized that what we learn in school is not only that a fragmented part of the reality, but it's also many times distorted. So many aspects that we learn in school, unfortunately, are lies. And on top of them, that are all also the aspects which are presented to us in mass media, in the TV news, that are even more lies. And probably by now, and I hope by now, most of us realize that the mainstream media, it's only presenting lies to us. By the way, one of the educations that I got is journalism. And I realized quite soon that this with the freedom of speech and democracy are very fine words, but they don't work in practice. So as a journalist, you are not free to write what you actually want to write about. You have to write what your boss tells you to write. All these lead us to form an opinion about reality, to have the so-called our own point of view about what exists within us and also outside of us, which does not comply with the ultimate godly truth. And if we come back to the beginning of this webinar, when I said that when we are on a spiritual path, what we seek is spiritual liberation. Spiritual liberation means, among other aspects, realizing profoundly, deeply within the ultimate godly truth. So without discovering it, we cannot actually have access to the spiritual liberation. The point of view makes the external and internal reality to be filtered, to be colored by certain personal factors, and creates a distinct, very personal way of reflecting the reality, but without necessarily having the prospect of, for example, philosophy or ideology. So we can briefly define what it is a point of view through constitutive schemes upon life. So we can define the point of view as constitutive schemes upon life. The predominant point of view, which we maintained, builds a conception upon life, created entirely by our mental filtering. So we have many layers, many filters through which the reality reaches us, and therefore it generates considerable changes of reality. One particular example of the prevailing point of view is optimism, or its opposite, the pessimism, that makes us perceive the reality in a very nuanced way. We know definitely by now that both the optimist and the pessimist are looking upon exactly the same reality, but it is the point of view that shapes, that gives a certain nuance to how they perceive reality. So therefore, you will have two opposite points of view on the exactly same aspect. So when our perspective mysteriously approaches the point of view of God, we begin to attain the state of wisdom. And this is one of the most important steps on the path to spiritual liberation, or what we can also call the highest level of perfection or transformation. In contrast to this is the point of view of the bad, vain, haughty, crafty, full of self-importance, arrogant, rigid, lacking generosity, full of malicious critique, accusing, frustrated, and so on human being. Therefore, we need to understand that some points of view chain us and others free us, because every point of view generates a state of occult resonance with corresponding energies from the macrocosm. So this is also another operative key to keep in mind, because it can be used in a practical manner every single day with basically everything that we think or feel or do. So it depends entirely on us whether our point of view is angelic, divine, transfigurative, or on the contrary, it's demonic or even infernal. Discovering our prevailing point of view, full of lucidity and also sincerity, honesty, is really essential for our inner transformation. In order to remove the slag or the samskaras, as they are called in Sanskrit, that still exist in our subconscious, because we need to understand our prevailing point of view is coloring how we perceive reality. So it is really a very, very important aspect to have clarified for us, to discover what point of view do I have upon reality. And even if right now we don't have the point of view of God, which of course we strive for, at least it is much better to build up a point of view which is transfigurative, beneficial, constructive, than to have, in case we notice that we have a point of view which is not at all constructive, which is not at all beneficial, neither for us nor for others. So we need to understand that even God has his mysterious point of view. And the more we do our best to have an intuition, at least in the beginning, to understand, to feel, to intuit what is God's point of view, it will help us tremendously, because we will have more compassion, we will have more understanding, we will have a much higher level, a much higher perspective upon reality and other human beings, and also upon ourselves. And it will help us tremendously on the path of self-development, of self-transformation. So we need to understand that the wise human always has her point of view. The ignorant human always has her point of view. The generous human always has her point of view. The mischievous human always has her point of view. The one who is always full of transfiguration has always her point of view. The one who is grumpy and not on a good mood and limited has always her point of view. The one who is good and loving and kind has always her point of view. And the one who is contracted and selfish has always her point of view. So we can understand the importance of the often unsuspected point of view. It is not possible for the crazy human being to see the same tree the same way a wise man sees it. So any questions that you have, I will take them at the end, if it is all right with you. I see that Gupta raised hand. So please put your question in the Q&A section or in the chat section, and I will answer all of these questions at the end. It is no longer possible for the demonized human being to see the same reality as, for example, an advanced yogi already sees the reality. It is not coincidentally that it is said that the mistrust, doubt, skepticism are often flaws of the stupid. So from this point of view, the worst error is to have one or more false ideas about the truth, because then all these will hinder us to discover the ultimate godly truth, keeping us in a state of ignorance which hides God from us. And all spiritual evolution is about discovering God. So when we start having, or when we continue having false ideas about truth, they will hinder us from achieving actually the highest level of self-realization. So it is important to discover the truth, as it is important to notice whenever we still have false ideas about the truth. Beside these three great illusions that we have briefly presented so far, there is still one very insidious, namely the illusion that we accept when swallowing, so to say, without chewing, what third parties think of others. For example, did you hear what X have done? Or did you hear what X have said? When we accept what someone presents to us about another one, undigested, we accept, actually, I call it to adopt the mental ghosts produced by someone else. So allow me to develop the idea. Nobody, but absolutely nobody, can offer us an insight or a feedback upon an issue, being, or phenomenon, which is 100% objective, right? The only one who is able to give us a perfectly objective feedback after God is the spiritual guide, because he is like a crystal mirror who reflects the reality of the wisdom of the heart. So I'm sure that you at least once noticed, for example, that even your best friend or even your innermost beloved does not really know yourself completely, and therefore their point of view on you, on us, is not a perfect reflection of who we are at that moment. And everyone, when they give an opinion on others, of course they will make it through the light of their current filters, their current lenses, so to say, which means that they give us only a mental projection with some partial bits of truth, but never a 100% objective opinion on us or on others. So if we don't have yet the capacity, the necessary capacity to offer even to our best friends an objective opinion, and our best friend, we've known him or her for years, then the less we can do this to people whom we do not know so well as would like to leave the impression. When a specific mental projection is repeated often enough, the one who makes this gives birth to what I call mental ghosts, which in time becomes independent and takes nearly an independent life. And it's quite interesting. I don't know if you read the book Mystics and Magicians of Tibet by Alexandra David Neal, but in this book, she describes how she learned to create mentally, so with the help of her mental power, such an entity who even acquired a life and a physical body because simply she needed a servant and she didn't have the necessary means to buy or to pay for one. Interestingly enough, after a while of having this mental creation, this mental ghost with a physical body for a while, she noticed that this mental creation of her started to have his own will and didn't listen to her anymore, and even started to manifest some very bizarre tendencies. So Alexandra had to uncreate that mental ghost she brought to this physical level. I don't say that we also can do the same, but whenever we do these mental projections, we actually create some, on a subtle level, some type of energy, which is not always good. So when somebody comes and presents to us her or his so-called mental ghost about someone else, no one forces us to accept it. Anyhow, we live in a big illusion. Why enhance it willingly by creating a so-called farm of ghosts? For example, I just take a funny example. Did you hear that X started her own business because she wants to make money? And the other one will reply, yes, how outrageous, darling. So beyond the lack of imagination of these conversations, there is usually a small problem with these situations. None of the gossipers know personally very well the human being they are talking about. They are neither her friend, hopefully, because if they are their friends, they are not very good friends, nor do they speak to her directly about that particular situation or even know who she really is or what's her personal history. So neither of the two backbiters did the minimum effort to get to know the human being they seem to know so many things about. But this does not prevent them from having formed an opinion about her, which is nothing else but a mental ghost. So when someone lives in the company of these his or her own mental ghosts, usually such a person will also search for the company of other people who have more or less the same point of view on these third parties in order to validate the projections that the mental ghost is made of. And the more people who have the same detrimental point of view on someone, the more those people will be convinced that what they believe is true. And therefore, the more they will seek to adjust the universe so as to fit to their opinions. Inevitably and fortunately, it will come the moment when the mental image we built about others is destroyed by reality. It will always come that moment. And then the feelings of pain, fear, lack that are an intrinsic part of the ego's consciousness, but which were covered astute by the respective mental ghosts, have now come back to the surface. Let's face it, people who are speaking badly about others are not exactly a role model of happiness and harmony. A human being who is happy, who is at peace, who is loving and kind, doesn't feel the need to speak badly about others. And I will cover this particular aspect a little bit more later on. So just as with any addiction, because this becomes unfortunately an addiction, such people feel great when the drug of speaking badly about others offered by this mental ghost is available and they can use it. One of the reasons why someone will prefer to make up their illusions about others instead of making a sincere effort to actually get to know that person is many times the feeling of inferiority. By projecting a bad opinion on someone else, such a human being will feel temporarily high, meaning better. But invariably, it comes the time when the so-called drug of speaking badly about others no longer gives us the expected fruits. And when those painful feelings we had in us before this bizarre relationship of cohabitation with our own mental projections recurred, we feel them even more intense and acute than before. In addition, the ego makes us perceive the other as the cause of these painful feelings and makes us blame the other because this is always the most convenient option for the ego. It is natural to be curious. It is natural to want to know more. Curiosity is a natural and necessary tendency of human development. It helps us to expand our horizons, to discover new aspects, to constantly exceed our limits. Without a state of alive curiosity, we would never get motivated, for example, to discover God and thus ourselves, our true self, our nature. Like all human tendencies, Also, curiosity is of several types. The superior type of curiosity, in which our soul inspires us to discover the truth about life, about the universe, about ourselves, about our loved ones, about subtle plans, world of angels and deities, about God. And there is also another curiosity, which I call the market one, that nudges us to find out what laundry is washed by our neighbors, so to speak. Or, for example, to go to the yoga hall just to find out which other techniques are taught, because our aspiration is numb. And anyway, we no longer put into practice the old techniques, and so on. So now let's see what are some of the consequences of this tendency to spend our time with mental ghosts instead of reaching for a supernatural clarity of consciousness. One of the consequences I already mentioned is namely deepening the illusion in which we already live. From this, we can deduce that our pace of spiritual evolution is slowed down, directly proportional to the number of mental ghosts we live with. And you will, if you have a good power of visualization, you can see this direct connection between the number of false opinions, of false ideas about reality, and our pace of evolution. So the more we can clear, the more we can purify our consciousness, the quicker our pace of spiritual evolution will get. When the wireless phone is set in motion, what such people generate is also something which is very good to understand, is the creation of a detrimental collective mentalization, because usually gossipers, they spread rumors. They will not gossip only to one person. They usually have the tendency to speak with more. So when you have more people thinking the same bad aspects about one person, for example, they create, by the power of the group, a detrimental collective mentalization. And especially if the intent with which this is done, if the intention is destructive, the created karma is really terrible. So therefore it is 1,000 times better to think 10 times before we spread any denigrating rumors about somebody, even if they are true, to avoid thus becoming the primary source of collective detrimental mentalization. So before we speak, we can actually ask ourselves these questions. Is it what I'm about to say? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And if we cannot answer with yes to all 5 of these, it's better not to speak. Because the responsibility for it is very big. And here I will remind you about an occult principle, the principle of shock in return. And this principle functions like this. The maleficent energy focused on another person will strike back its creator with a force which is 3 times bigger. So everything that we send out will come back 3 times bigger. So if we send out something which is beneficial, constructive, divine, transfigurative, it will come back to us 3 times bigger. Every time we send out something which is detrimental, destructive, maleficent, it will also strike back 3 times bigger. Instead, we can choose to be the source of a beneficial collective mentalization, so that everything we talk about others is about their existing real qualities. We don't need to invent qualities. So we are lucid, we notice which beautiful qualities they have, and then we can speak about those existing real qualities. We can speak about the good deeds done by them. And this will create a very beneficial atmosphere, and the energy that we send out, it is a beneficial, uplifting one. It will come back to us in the same frequency vibration. And you can easily imagine what a paradisiacal atmosphere of true spiritual brotherhood and sisterhood we would create by speaking well of others, by mentalizing they are divine beings, God's children, who are in a wonderful adventure for the revelation of the godly immortal self, Atman, exactly as we are. Another consequence is the state of occult resonance in which we choose to maintain ourselves whenever we believe in the existence of the created so-called mental ghosts, either by ourselves or by others. If we give poison to others, then our food will consist precisely of this poison, inevitable. And this is the occult law of offering, which says exactly this, very concise. Whatever we give, it's exactly the same that we'll receive. If we give nectar, we will receive nectar. If we offer poison, we will receive poison. So it is good to think before we give something, what is the content of our present. If it is a beneficial present, very good, then we will offer it. But if we notice that the content of what we are about to offer is not exactly the best, even if you don't care so much about the person you are giving it to, think of yourself, because you will receive back what you are about to give. So don't give something which is not beneficial both for the other one as well as for yourself. Two of the consequences deriving from these ones are the loss of our peace of mind. And focusing on the flaws, defects, and inferior aspects, true or false, of other people just keeps us into an occult resonance with them. And this is the irony of fate. We become what we think or talk about others. We can also understand another very important aspect. We can only see in others what already exists in us, and this is the mysterious principle of reflection. For example, if we mind very much certain traits in someone else, it is precisely because they exist in us. But we don't want to, so-called, take the bull by the horns and solve these issues in us. If, on the other hand, we sincerely admire the wonderful qualities of other people, it is precisely because these qualities exist in us. Always, without exception, we perceive in others exactly what already exists within us. Therefore, the wisest is to consciously choose always what state of occult resonance we want to be into, what type of energies we want to modulate, what type of energies we want to give and therefore to receive. And by choosing always only the elevated godly resonances, we now build an extraordinary future for ourselves. Do you realize the efficiency and the power of acting like this? So I will now present for you some practical ideas for what I called exercising our mental ghosts and thus attaining a supernatural clarity of consciousness. Every time there is a tendency within us to offer our opinion on someone else with such generosity, quote unquote, we first have to ask ourselves the following common sense questions. Do I know with certainty that what I am about to say about this person is true? Is it beneficial for me, the state of occult resonance that I create by expressing this detrimental point of view? What reaction actually stirs in me expressing these bad opinions? is what is my intention? Does it help me expressing this bad opinion to evolve spiritually? How does this inferior point of view appears to me if I'd contemplate it from the point of view of God for at least 3 minutes? And this last question is really crucial and essential. Every time we will ask ourselves this, no matter what opinion we want to express, how this point of view will appear to me if I would do my best to contemplate it from the point of view of God for at least 3 minutes, this will place us into a state of occult resonance with the supramental level. It will place into resonance with God's mind, and it will give us a much higher perspective. Many times we will have really miraculous intuitions about, for example, the aspect or the person we want to express an opinion about, and it will also help us a lot to get rid of these mental ghosts, to see reality as it is, and to be closer to the point of view of God. So this is a very, very good practical aspect to apply in the daily life, no matter what we want to express as an opinion. When we feel like giving a bad feedback about a particular person, even if it's true, again, even if we think it's true, stop for a minute. Place yourself in the middle of your chest at the level of your spiritual heart in Anahata chakra. Feel the spiritual presence that exists there, silent. Reconnect with this spiritual source. Only after you really feel centered and you feel this reconnection with the spiritual source, when you feel that you are centered in the spiritual heart, act or speak, you will see that the heart sees things differently than the mind, and the reaction will be almost completely different than the one which was about to unfold. When we indulge in giving in to this tendency to create or adopt mental ghosts due to the triggered process of occult resonance, of course the tendency will increase more and more. So it is very good if we start paying attention every time we want to create such a mental ghost or to adopt it from other persons, and to stop. Nobody forces us to accept it. We don't need to accept it. We don't need to feed it with our energy anymore. What we have to do then is to completely transcend this way of reacting and to mirror reality superiorly from the supramental levels. And I will also come with some practical ideas about that. This requires an objective, lucid knowledge of the situations and makes possible that our inner universe will become more and more like a crystal mirror centered in the spiritual heart. So take just a few seconds and visualize, imagine, feel how it will be, how your life would look like if you will operate from these levels almost all the time, being centered in your spiritual heart, having this clarity of consciousness, being really in touch with reality, and therefore expressing points of view which are closer and closer to the point of view of God. This will gradually awaken in us what the sages, what the wise men called the wisdom of the heart. To be able to express our opinion on a human being and to be sure that this represents an objective feedback, this is what will have to happen. Our judgment on him or her needs to comprise almost their entire range of human experience. almost all the thoughts that they had, all their intentions, words, and actions that they experienced before. Also, having an opinion about another human being should take into consideration the varying degrees of knowledge of that person of the will of God. That is to say, that we should be able to measure differently her or his capacity to accomplish the will of God. Only then, now we can give our opinion on another human being. So before we express some opinions, we need to ask ourselves honestly, am I able to cover all these aspects mentioned above? If you are looking at them, at these aspects that I just presented here in point 4, you'll understand, you'll realize that this is a capacity which only enlightened or spiritually liberated beings have. When we will reach that level, we will be able to do the same. Until we reach that level, it is much better to think twice before we say something about another human being, because we don't even know ourselves. We don't even know the entire range of human experience we had, all the thoughts we had, all our intentions, words, and actions. We don't always realize if we are doing and to which extent we are doing God's will. So we don't even know ourselves so well in order to express all the time 100% objective opinion about ourselves. So we need to think twice before we express opinions about others. We also need to rely always our opinions about other people on our personal experience with them, because we all have different opinions. I'm sure, for example, in your group of friends, for example, if you are 4 people in a group of friends, I'm sure that if you will talk with each other, you will discover that all of you will have slightly different opinions about each other. And this is normal, this is human. So if you have a good opinion about someone and somebody comes and will share a bad opinion about the same person, keep your own ghost, because it's definitely better than to adopt the neighbor's ghosts. If still the detrimental opinion based on so-called facts makes you wonder, the easiest is to go and ask the person if it is true what it is said about her or him. Do this, especially when such a gesture on your part involves from you to get out of your comfort zone, because you also will give proof of a certain generosity of consciousness. In this way, you will be able to train your ability to be generous in settling the differences through frank, open, heart-to-heart communication with that person. Obviously, there is a risk to be lied to your face, but at least you've shown dignity, integrity, and you've gone over a certain psychological discomfort by confronting that human being. We notice that those who behave often disharmoniously, they do it because in their inner forum, they are tormented by different sufferings and problems. So to offer a bad opinion about them, it does not help us, because, as I explained, we enter in the exact state of occult resonance with the energy of those flaws we see in the other one. And it definitely does not even help the person in cause, because she or he certainly needs our love, our compassion, our empathy, and not our destructive mentalizations. So a practical solution is to exercise often our generosity and ability to give whatever it is good, a smile, a kind word, a hug, a blessing, or even a friendly shaking of the person, because who loves well scolds well. One of the best, most efficient ways to attain a supernatural clarity of consciousness is to practice the techniques for awakening, activating, and developing our supramental structure. The fourth sheath of the human being is Vijnana Maya Kosha, or what it is also called, the supramental sheath or structure. The word Vijnana means knowledge. So Vijnana Maya Kosha is the sheath of higher knowledge. It is the seat of the intellect, the higher aspect of the mental structure. It knows, decides, judges, and exercises the discriminatory function between what it is good or bad, valuable or worthless, useful or useless. It is also the level of individual consciousness. That is, it is the strong wave of I am. At the level of supramental sheath, it is also our individual soul. This is the sheath of the individual consciousness where decisions are made and where actions are initiated with a background that is always fresh, unconditional living in the present moment. So whenever you are able to place yourself at the level of your supramental, you live here and now. And that grants you a much higher chance to perceive reality exactly as it is and to experience this very beautiful clarity of your consciousness. Our supramental level comprises the level of deep consciousness, or chitta as it is called in Sanskrit, through the awakening of which the being awakens her capacity to know in the authentic way, to be a lucid observer, and to be detached from what is happening. In this state, we may be able to experience reality exactly as it is, and not to fantasize or speculate about it any longer. Also, at the level of supramental, the process of knowing the I begins to awaken. It means that at this level, we start seeking and becoming aware of our identity with the Supreme Self, or Atman, as it is called in Sanskrit. And this is actually the highest aim of any spiritual evolution, discovering, revealing the Supreme Self. This spiritual awakening is a first step on the path to wisdom. Another practical aspect that we can apply in our daily life when we feel the need to attain this clarity of consciousness is understanding and applying practically the godly principles. I will just give you here a few examples. There are many more other divine principles. We can understand and then also apply the principle of the unique, the principle of correspondence, the principle of resonance, the principle of cause and effect, the principle of efficient transformation, the principle of inner alchemy. I already mentioned the principle of resonance when I said that whatever we offer, it will come back to us. So we need to understand that everything we think, do, say, is placing us in a specific state of resonance. The principle of the unique, it will help us understand that there is only one reality, and that reality is God manifested in different shapes and forms. The principle of inner alchemy, for example, will help us transform, sublimate all inner inferior tendencies which are still present into divine godly attributes and aspects, and so on. So it is important for us to understand the existence of these principles, to understand the mechanisms behind them, and then to apply them. Because when you understand how these principles function, you will be able to live your life in accordance with them. For example, when you understand the principle of cause and effect, when you understand that what you do, it will be done to you, you will be much more careful with what you do, no matter if doing implies thinking, saying, or acting. So all these principles are of a huge, tremendous help for us in our spiritual transformation, because understanding how they function, you will understand also the consequences of everything we do. Another practical aspect that we can apply is to assimilate in our inner universe on a daily basis the sublime, subtle energy of godly attributes. And whenever we do that, whenever we meditate with the godly attributes, and on our TV channel of our yoga school, there are made these exemplifications every evening, we actually start amplifying in us these sublime subtle energies of godly attributes, enhance them, awaken them, amplify them more and more. And this will lead to the fact that we will become more and more in the likeness and image of God. This is not an exhaustive list of practical methods for achieving a supernatural clarity of consciousness, but it is an efficient starting point. And now let's see some qualities that can be of real help in exercising mental ghosts and attaining a supernatural clarity of consciousness. One very good quality to have, to cultivate, to develop, to enhance is humility. The one who is very humble, even if she sees everything, she does not look upon any of this in order to criticize maliciously and superficially. Because she understands that person understands that every manifested suspicion disturbs our serenity, purity, deep peace of heart, and it muddies the clarity of consciousness. Also, real humbleness means understanding your place in report to God. And the real humbleness is not in front of other people. Actually, the true humbleness is the one you have in front of God. Common sense. As our spiritual guide said many times, the first paranormal power that is necessary for us to develop when we practice yoga is the common sense. Common sense can be defined as what you don't like, don't do it upon others. And nowadays, unfortunately, common sense is not so common. So if we have this as a golden rule that we lead our life by, that if we don't like something, we don't do it upon others, we will be able to avoid a lot of suffering, both our own, but also suffering that we might infringe upon others, inflict upon others, willingly or unwillingly. And common sense is not very difficult to develop and to manifest. It requires a little bit of training and a lot of attention. So it is good to have these paranormal powers in our backbones. Another quality which is very good for us to have, and it will help us not only with having a very beautiful clarity of consciousness, but also a very deep state of inner peace and happiness, is transfiguration, a strong state of transfiguration. Every human being, even the overly demonic one, has at least one good aspect present in her or in him. So for us, it is just to discover that quality in every human being we come into contact with, focus on that which is good and beautiful in others, and this will produce small miracles and even great ones. And here I will give you an example. In one of the Shakti groups that I am having, we have every time what I called homeworks, but not like in school. We work with godly attributes, with divine qualities that we want to develop. So at a certain moment, one of the women in the group spoke about some tensions she was feeling while at work, because her boss was treating very badly everyone. And she, being also a sensitive woman, was affected quite hardly by it. So I suggested to her to do exactly this, to find at least one good quality in that woman, her boss, and every time she thinks of her, interacts with her, comes into contact with her, she should have only this quality very strong in her mind, focus her consciousness upon this intensely. So 2 weeks after, when we met again, I asked, how is the relationship with your boss? And she was telling us, 2 weeks. Keep in mind, only 2 weeks. She said, the boss is smiling to me, and she invited me to lunch. And we were also having a job trip to another city. And she said, I will pay for your ticket. So, of course, that was a huge difference between how this boss usually treated her employees and how she was treating now my students in the Tantra for Women. And I asked her, is your boss doing exactly this with all the other employees? And she said, no, she's doing that only with me. So you see, a strong state of transfiguration can produce small miracles in a very short period of time. Another quality which we'll all need to develop more and more is remembering our ultimate purpose in this life. This real return to home puts things in a whole different perspective, closer to God's perspective. It helps us amplify in us the godly attribute of the godly good that results in the disappearance of the evil, including here also the tendency to give birth or to support our mental ghosts. And it is also a very known principle, the principle of balance and symmetry. And we can put this aspect like this. The presence of good implies the absence of evil. The presence of evil implies the absence of good. So if we want to have more and more good in our life, less and less evil, the wisest practical thing to do is to amplify in us the godly attribute of godly good. Humor and compassion are other qualities that are helping a lot in having a very beautiful clarity of consciousness. When someone willingly, unwillingly wrongs us for our own mental health, it's best to get amused or to awake the compassion towards those mistakes or mischief. Another quality that is very beneficial for us to awaken and develop is soul generosity. It is much better to cultivate the generosity of our soul, in which we aim to offer others our unconditional love. And remember, the others need our love the most when they deserve it the least. I'm sure that you can think of at least one such example right now. When, for example, someone near to you did something or said something which it was not the best for you. And exactly in that moment, that person needed our love the most, because remember, people who are happy, harmonious, balanced, they behave correspondingly. They do harmonious, balanced actions. People who are suffering on one level or another, they will reflect that in their actions, gestures, or words. So have compassion for people who don't behave the best, because you behave the best when you are happy and at peace. Firmness is another quality. This state can greatly assist us in ceasing to imitate others, especially in the evil aspects, and to control our unleashed imagination and our fallible senses. Empathy. If we would feel how others are really like, we would spontaneously embrace them when we notice they suffer. We will seek to alleviate their suffering to the best of our abilities whenever they deserve it. Forgiveness. Without the ability to forgive, we will always be haunted by mental ghosts, ours or others. There is a very simple and efficient prayer that you can say 7 times in a row, standing, with your eyes closed, facing magnetic north, meaning geographic south. So this is a very simple technique, which is extremely efficient. So whenever you feel that you hold grudges, that you are hurt because something was said or done to you by somebody else, what you can do is choose to do this technique. So you stand, you face geographic south, you close your eyes, you interiorize. It will be even better if you do the consecration before, of course. And then you will say this very simple prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, I beg you humbly to shed in my soul thy divine energy of forgiveness. Please help me to totally and unconditionally forgive all those who have wronged me, willingly and unwillingly. Thank you for listening to my prayer and for helping me. Amen. So after you say this prayer, you still keep your eyes closed, and you notice the flow of the divine energy of forgiveness entering the top of your head, flooding your entire being, and pay attention to the state, the inspiration that you feel. After a few short minutes, you say the prayer again, and again for a couple of minutes, you just pay attention, are conscious upon the effects of the prayer. And you do this 7 times, all in all. At the end of the 7 times, you will have to pay attention even more to your state, especially to your state in relation to the person you like to forgive. If you notice that still you forgave a little bit, but not completely, never mind. You will repeat the same next day. And you will do this every day until you really feel that you managed, you succeeded to forgive completely that person. This technique is really a divine gift for us, because many times forgiveness robs us from our peace of heart. It can even make us sick, and it will really keep us connected to the person that we cannot forgive. So whenever we are thinking of that person that we cannot forgive, and we are holding a grudge, and we are not being able to surrender, to let go, subtly, on a subtle level, we are tied up to that person. And here I will also tell you a little bit of a funny story. A friend of mine came to me to tell me that she is very upset with the common friend of ours. And she was very, very upset and said, I will never forgive her. And then I explained to her very shortly that as long as she cannot forgive her, she will be tied up to that person. And maybe this will imply even that she will have to incarnate another life just in order to be able to forgive her. And her spontaneous reaction was, I will forgive her. I forgive her. I don't want to incarnate again just to forgive. I forgive her now. So this is also a very special quality that all of us can awaken and amplify even more than we already have. Another quality is unshakable faith in God, because always, without exception, a fundamentally good-hearted human being cannot do or will not do harm on purpose. This is because of his unshakable faith in God. When you have this unshakable faith in God, harming others really feels deep inside, as if you harm God and yourself in the same time. You will not be able to do that. Silence is another good quality that we can amplify more. It is much wiser to remain silent and not to sow wind so that we do not reap storm. Obviously, it's necessary to do it with discernment so that our silence will not make us somehow accomplice of the mistakes of others. Accountability, another big quality that is very good to awaken and amplify. When we assume the responsibility for our intentions, thoughts, and deeds, we stop in the same second to be a powerless victim, including to our inferior tendencies. The moment we assume responsibility for what we think, do, feel, we understand also in the same moment that actually it is within our power to choose the resonance we have, to choose whatever state we want to experience. So accountability is a very precious quality to develop. Have you noticed that when you really love someone, you do not spread inferior opinions about that human being? So, logically, the one about whom we spread bad opinions, we do not love. And we can think like this. How many people we actually do love? How many people we are not yet able to love? And it is almost like a mathematical equation if you put it into this perspective. Each of us experiences in the present moment what we have already chosen in the past. So whatever we experience right now, whatever takes place in our life, it is the consequences of something we thought, did, said previously. This life or another life. We need to understand that we have exactly what we deserve and we experience exactly what we already did upon ourselves or upon others. So we can shape our future by being very conscious of what choices we make now. And we can choose to be closer to the image and likeness of God. As an impulse at the end of this webinar, remember that weak, irresponsible human beings have problems. Strong, spiritually awakened and responsible beings have always creative solutions which fill with amazement the inert ones. So therefore, strong human beings improve their own destiny with God's help. Choose consciously every moment in what state of occult resonance you want to be. What type of energies do you want to enter your system? What types of thoughts, states, feelings do you want to have? And then you will understand that you have the power to be happy, healthy, full of the ability to love. You can be good, kind, compassionate, generous, cheerful, pristine, divine. In this manner, you will develop a supernatural clarity of your consciousness, and this will help you tremendously to accelerate your spiritual evolution by light years. So who knows, maybe in this life you will be able to attain the spiritual liberation. So now if you have questions, I will be happy to answer them. So I see here a question: how to get rid of the so-called mental ghosts if I create it myself, and when I lack presence, it grows fears and paranoid tendencies. I hope I already explained to a certain degree all these 10 steps, practical steps that I explained. One of the most efficient manners in which you are able to get rid of the mental ghosts, of course, those created also by yourself, is to practice everything in connection to the supramental layer, to the supramental structure. For example, Laya Yoga with the first mantra, or Laya Yoga with the Bija mantra for Ajna Chakra, the third eye. Or if you are in the superior years of yoga, all of the techniques which are presented in the awakening of the third eye or Ajna Chakra. Also a very let's say simple manner to be able to get rid of mental ghosts, especially when we lack presence, is exactly this: to take a firm decision, to be more and more aware of whatever goes in our mind. It is also very important not to beat ourselves, not to be harsh and criticize ourselves when we are not able to be present, to be conscious and aware. So we take this decision. I will be more and more aware of whatever goes in my consciousness. And we can also take a firm decision to get rid of all the bad thoughts, all the inferior, detrimental thoughts that pop up in our consciousness. And we can do like that. We decide when we start the day, we remind ourselves. We can even have a stick note somewhere that says awareness, or you choose a word which will work for you. Awareness. And we put there on a mirror or in the bathroom, somewhere we can see it. And then whenever we see it, we remember, now, okay, I will pay attention to whatever is going on in my consciousness. And we take the firm decision whenever we notice that we have an inferior thought, a detrimental, a maleficent thought, we stop. And we put instead in our consciousness the opposite beneficial thought. And we will practice this every single day whenever we remember. You will see that in the beginning it will be a little bit of a struggle, because the mind will not allow us to take control so much. Doesn't matter, we will just continue. And it will be maybe even a bit frustrating when we notice that we already have the inferior thoughts. We already had it in our consciousness. Doesn't mind, we are tenacious. Perseverantly, we just continue getting rid of more and more of the inferior, maleficent thoughts we have in our consciousness, until we will notice after a few weeks or months of practice that there are less and less inferior thoughts popping up into our consciousness, until we will reach a level or a state in which our mind is completely quiet. And we will live more and more at the level of our supramental sheath, where there is completely silence. We have ideas, we are able to speak while our mind is completely silent. So we don't have anymore these mental ghosts. And if they appear again, we will do the same. We pay attention. As soon as we notice they enter the space of our consciousness, we stop. And then we put instead the beneficial thought. And we do that until we notice very clear results. Another question is from Madalena. I was thinking to ask what would be best to do if we are so-called victims of gossip and such. But you already answered that in the last part of the presentation. So when we are the victim of gossip, I will just put it as a small reminder. You can forgive. It's one of the aspects. You can even do blessings for the persons. And you can also go and confront. I usually do this. I do blessings and then I go and I confront that person and I ask, why are you saying this about me? What is your intention? Would you like to get to know me better and form your own opinion? Did I do something to wrong you? If I did and I didn't realize, I apologize. So there are things that we can do when we are so-called victims of gossip. And you know what? As long as we live, there will always be people who will talk about us, badly or beneficially. Don't worry so much, because if you are sincere in your strive for spiritual evolution, if you do the best to be a decent, good, kind, loving human being, we will always be confronted. We will be confronted with these aspects here and there. Don't take them personally. Don't allow them to affect your peace of mind. Be kind, be compassionate, and also understand that people doing this, they don't feel so well themselves, so they need our compassion. And a question from Gupta. Thank you for such a wonderful revelation and teachings. How can we take care of our inner universe, as the mental ghosts or illusions created about ourselves take away from reality and is more detrimental? So the simplest, from my point of view, way to take care of our inner universe is by practicing yoga diligently on a daily basis, by having a spiritual practice which is really serious and also generous. This is the best way to take care of our inner universe. Another aspect in regards to how to take care of our inner universe is self-compassion. We also need to understand that we have also a personal history. We have luggage in our, so to say, on our back. We have been through so many aspects, through so many situations which affected us. Some of them in a beneficial manner, but others in a not so beneficial manner. So self-compassion is also necessary when we take care of our inner universe. Self-love, so having patience with ourselves, loving who we are. And loving who we are doesn't mean that we indulge in no matter what and we accept no matter which inferior tendencies. Loving who we are means we are aware that we are on a spiritual path. We are evolving. It takes effort. It takes patience. It takes perseverance. We are humans. We make mistakes. So when we do some mistakes, we will take responsibility for them and we will make sure we will not repeat them. We forgive also ourselves. So, for example, the techniques that I presented for you about forgiveness, we need to do that also with ourselves. I'm sure that all of us, if we look within a little bit, we will discover that we have some aspects, some corners of our inner universe that we need to forgive. We did something, or we accepted something, or we indulged into something that was not so good for us, and we need to have self-compassion, understanding, forgive us. So these mental ghosts or illusions, they are hiding reality from us. They are detrimental for us, but we also need to understand this lies in the human nature. So if we want to attain this supernatural clarity of consciousness, to be on a level of this continuous clarity and living at the supramental level, it takes practice, it takes patience, and it takes a serious spiritual undergoing. It is very possible. So self-forgiveness, self-compassion, and diligent spiritual practice is the best way to take care of your inner universe. And there is another comment here from Madalena. Thank you very much, Georgiana. Actually, I was usually having the tendency to avoid those people instead of confronting them. So that's a new thing for me to try. Such an enlightening webinar, by the way. Thank you once more. Yes, also avoiding is one strategy. But if you notice that you avoid them, but you still think of them, and you are still affected by what they did or said about you, you can give it a try to confront them, because maybe you will discover some true friends. I'm speaking of my own experience. So I confronted such a person many, many years ago, and we became best friends. We discovered, both of us, that we were living with a mental projection upon the other. So I was having a wrong mental image of her. She was having a wrong mental image of me. And when we start interacting with each other and opening up and speaking to each other, we become best friends. We discovered that we admire, appreciate, and like each other very much. So from a situation like this, with a little bit of a gossip involved, it went to becoming best friends after such a confrontation. So if you, and it's also very good training, because it takes you out of your comfort zone, and it will also imply a little bit of inner strength and also some other qualities, because it's a psychological discomfort when you go and speak with another human being who was speaking badly about you. This is a good example. I also have, unfortunately, a bad example when I did the same. I went and confronted a woman who was not very kind in her opinions, and he was very generous in spreading them. So I went to her, I told her that I know she's speaking that, and I was asking her why. And that confrontation didn't lead to anything. So it is also possible that you will be in some similar situation with that. But for me, it was a very good thing to do, because I was able to get over this psychological discomfort, and I was able to manifest a little bit courage, so to say, to just go and confront her. And it was not easy, but I'm happy that I did it, even if it didn't lead to a friendship. But for me, it led to an increased courage and also a little bit more dignity from my part. I saw somebody raising her hand. I'm very grateful if you are able to type your questions. From Jessica, or Jessica, because I noticed that you write in Swedish. And she's saying, please allow me a few seconds because I need to translate it from Swedish. How do you do in case you need to forgive the same person over and over again? Should you avoid that person, or it is meant that you should train your ability to forgive? This is a complex questions, and it depends very much on the type of relationship you have with that person. If you can, if you are in the situation to forgive the same person over and over again, I don't know exactly what type of relation, Jessica, you have with that person, but it sounds like a toxic relation. So when you are in a toxic relation, there are not so many options. So best is to avoid in such a situation. If it happens once in a while, we are all humans and we are all making mistakes. So yes, you will be in a relationship, for example, you will hurt each other without wanting sometimes, and then you forgive. But if you say like this over and over again, you need to forgive somebody, it sounds like a toxic relation, and a toxic relation is not something to have. So yes, it's good to train your ability to forgive, but maybe not the same person over and over again. So if you don't have other questions, then I will thank you very much for your attention. I'm very happy that I was able to... there are more questions, okay. Then would you please, Mihaela, be so kind and put them for me so I can see them? So good, now I see them, just a second. Gupta is saying, yes, I have also always avoided confronting people who are full of mental ghosts, but then I now realize that I have to be a bit discriminate on which situation is best to confront. Thank you. Yes, you'll have to decide for yourself when it is good to simply confront somebody and when it is not the case. Because if you realize that, for example, going and speaking with a person will not lead to anything really, then it doesn't, don't waste your time. Forgive them, move on. But if you have somehow the intuition that if you will go and speak with that person, will clarify the situation and will take away this cloud of cloud of inferior, maleficent energy from both you and the other person, then even if it's uncomfortable, then do it. Have the courage to do it. But you need to decide for each situation which, when it is the case, to speak with the person and confront, and when it's just a waste of time and then you don't do it. And Anna, she says like this: thank you for this opportunity and sharing of your wisdom. What can I do with the very self-destructive ego that uses all I learned and possibilities against me, and my feeling of being powerless against it, falling back into victim role, forgetfulness, ignorance, and resistance very fast? It's having a huge impact on my life, and I feel the need to hide to protect others from my projections and toxic feeling outbursts. So, dear Anna, the first thing that comes to my consciousness when I read this is spiritual practice, because these aspects that you describe represent a certain resonance. And in order to break through this resonance and get rid of it, the simplest but most powerful manner is simply to have a very thorough spiritual practice. So you don't even have to, you can of course have a tapas or this assumed spiritual practice in which you consecrate the fruits of it and then you practice it. And it will help you a lot because every time we practice yoga, meditation, it purifies us, it removes some of these inferior resonances, and instead it creates very beautiful resonances. Also, meditations with godly attributes. So you simply go to the TV channel misatv.ro, and there are every evening exemplifications supported by our spiritual guide with godly attributes. So in this manner, you learn from God how to be good, how to have patience, how to have courage, and so on and so forth. And this is also of tremendous help. It is a good strategy not to hide, but to keep distance when you feel you have these toxic outbursts. It's a good strategy to have a safe distance from others. But the best panaceon, the best cure against this type of resonances is spiritual practice. So everything you do, it will help a lot because it will transform the resonance. So it will push away the inferior resonances and will fill you with superior, beneficial, divine resonances. So always the answer to this will be practice, practice, practice. It's the best proven, efficient way to solve all of our problems, including a self-destructive ego. And just as a joke, please allow me to joke a little bit. The ego is always creating these self-destructive tendencies in us. I never heard of somebody's ego who helped that person get enlightened. Not directly. So yes, our ego is creating self-destructive tendencies. It is very good that you are aware of them. Just practice more. And the more you'll practice, the better it will get. And then you'll have even more power to practice even more until you will reach a level in which your awareness and your clarity of consciousness will simply allow you to practice yoga no matter what else you do. Because yoga practice is not only when we sit on a yoga mat in the yoga halls, it is also in the middle of life, when we are in the middle of life doing whatever we are doing. So practice is the answer. And Anna says, thank you so much. This helps me a lot, and I did not feel judged. That gave love and healing to me just now. I'm very happy. I'm very happy to hear that. Madalena also says, from my own experience, I realized that when we love someone, it's very easy to forgive them. It comes naturally, without any effort to forgive. When we don't love, it's also difficult to forgive. Yes, it is. It's difficult to forgive. It's difficult to transfigure them. And this is why we should insist, especially there, because it shows that we have still things to improve. And Elena says, thank you for the many practical solutions. You are very welcome, Elena. And I'm happy that I can share with you and that you find some aspects that you can apply practically, because no matter the level of evolution we are on, practice, spiritual practice, it will always be the solution for us. It will always be the best help we can get. So, of course, there is also divine grace, but our own spiritual effort and practice is the one actually creating the premises for us to deserve divine grace. So, whatever problems we have, practice is the solution. You will see, because practice means enhancing, improving, heightening our resonance, our level of vibration, coming closer to God. So I don't know any other better solution than spiritual practice. Mihaela says, thank you, dear Georgiana, for accepting our invitation to present. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy that I have this chance, and I really feel like you are here in the room with me. It feels very warm in my heart. Thank you.